Hello, everybody. Welcome to Life Made Easier. I'm Dr. Tiffany Hunter, and I'm here with my colleague Karen, and we're going to be talking about consciousness, energy healing, all the kinds of things that you can bring into your everyday life to make your life easier.
And I'm Dr. Karen James, a psychologist and energy healer in the UK. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about chakras, the energy centers of our energy system. And I think this is fair to say this is a topic that there's quite a lot of confusion, misinformation, stuff about.
Excitement, drama.
So hopefully we will shed a little bit of light on what they are and what you might need to know about them.
We will try. Well, Karen and I, for those of you that have been listening to episodes before this, may be realizing that we're getting less and less pre-organized and more off the top of our heads. So hopefully this is going to go well. I was sharing with her that last week I actually ran a class on chakras, so I had to have a good long think about it. And when I say class, I really just mean an experience. We meet once a month in my office and we all get together and we try things out, we experiment. But one of the things that really occurred to me was that if I looked at the chakras from a healing point of view, which is really where I tend to think about it, right? Karen and you and I are healers, so we tend to think about chakras as healers. There's actually very little to say about them. They need to be clean, they need to be balanced. They need to be repaired occasionally. And that's kind of the end. That's kind of the end of the conversation. I don't know. I mean, would you? Yeah, they spin, right? Well, but everything that happens after that becomes a conversation about how to learn to keep them clean, balanced, and repaired, right? You need to know they spin, but the information is very basic, and that was not going to be very helpful for this event that I was showing up on as the expert in to lead people in an experience, because if you want to feel your chakras, it's not actually very helpful to just have that information. So I had to think about
can I just interrupt you for a second?
Please.
I think the other thing that I always think about them, which you may come on to, is that they're constantly changing. They're kind of like the aura when we've talked about before, people doing aura photography and seeing all the pretty colors in your aura. The trouble is just pointing a camera at your aura changes the colors, and it's something which is constantly in flux. And I think our chakras are quite like that. So they're kind of constantly responding, moving, changing a bit. So getting too focused on them is often kind of unhelpful, and so it's hard to pin down, because it's something which is, what's my digestive system doing in this moment? It's constantly in the process of processing.
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you and I have done 4 podcasts about the aura. We can talk about the aura endlessly.
That's
and
true.
It's only now occurring to us that we should talk about chakras. And in the living lab, in the experimental, we did chakras because we have been doing auras for the last 3 months. And the next obvious step is the chakras, because each of the chakras relates to each of the layer of the aura. And I was shocked at how little I could come up with. But this is what I want to run past you, Dr. Karen. In order to solve this problem of not showing up to this event useless, in my efforts to support people to feel their chakras, I realized that I needed to move out of the realm of healer and into the realm of spiritual seeker.
Right.
Because as soon as I allowed myself that, and for those that know us, we don't often allow ourselves that. We're not really great at that. Once I allowed myself to bring forward my spiritual seeking self, then the chakras became something that was much easier to talk about, and easier to talk about in ways that people could then internalize as a means to understanding and owning their chakras as a part of their body. Because then it became more meaningful to talk about things like how the throat chakra relates to my communication and how I show up in the world, and things like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. And that Yeah, I can see how that's an easier direction to approach them from. And I think in truth, just if for full disclosure, I don't think it was that it hadn't occurred to us to talk about chakras. I think we'd been putting it off because we were kind of like, how much is there really to say about it? Is that an episode?
How much is there really to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
In the face of a plethora of information on the internet and in books about the chakras, and feeling a little not up to the task, because
yeah,
I mean, I'm curious if you agree with these words, but my experience of us is that we just don't, we interface with them in a way that is so much more simple as healers compared to the amount of information and discussion that you see around us about them. And it's a little daunting to kind of put your toe in that and say, well, actually, they really just need to be balanced and clean and
yeah,
possibly repaired.
yeah. I mean, they're kind of like when the tires of your car are out of alignment, you kind of want them running smoothly and
Yeah.
yeah, in reasonable harmony with each other so that something doesn't get too out of balance.
Yeah. So I would like to give us both permission to allow the other parts of our brain, the spiritual seeker part, the more poetic side of ourselves to come forward, because I think if we can combine all of that material together, it'll be a much more enriching and helpful conversation.
Excellent. Go forth.
Like I see from the tone that I should start.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
So this is, and again, as you can see, we're so off the cuff right here. I'm so curious how you feel about all this, Karen. But I've come across a lot of people and information about how each chakra has a color and each chakra has a vibration. And you can even, starting back in the day with Steve Halpern's chakra suite, like, each of these frequencies, these tones match the chakra, and you can clean your chakra by listening to that track, and you can get whole albums of that now. And I think even fairly recently, that's gotten really sophisticated and very popular with the can't remember the words, adagio tones, that there's a tone for Om, there's a tone for love, there's a tone for abundance. Have you come across these?
Not exactly. I mean, a little bit in yoga because I think there's like Om is, and I now I'm going to butcher this because I can't quite remember. There's a series of sounds that are very similar to Om, but different, and each one is, as I understand it, I'm very much not an expert on this, relates to the different chakras, and so chanting those vibrations, and you might do each one for a little bit and work your way up and or down the chakras. And my other experience of that is actually my husband is a musician, and some of his friends have actually created, and he was involved with a version of this, but a piece of music which is designed to at each stage. It's called glissando. They do on a guitar, where it's like you're not plucking, you're kind of staying with a particular note, and you work with that note for a period of time, then you move up to the next one, and again a kind of sound frequency related to each chakra. And I've experienced it, and it was certainly felt very relaxing, and a sense of something kind of moving up, I guess, an energy kind of moving up was my experience.
Like higher and higher frequencies?
Yeah, but in my body, like how it resonated in my body, like it kind of something, yeah, was sort of built up and was almost like a shift was happening, moving up my energy system. So starting with the base chakra.
Well, and of course, you guys have done some joint events together, haven't you? Sound and meditation together.
Yeah, and occasionally, I don't know if I've ever done this in one of those specific sessions. We've done several winter solstice sound meditations. I don't know that I've done any sort of meditations particularly focused around the chakras with his music, but Yeah. I think, but again, it's sort of like sound vibration definitely impacts our chakras, but it impacts our body, it impacts our emotions, it impacts our mind, it impacts our whole being.
Hmm.
So, of course, it impacts the chakras as well. Um, yeah, and I think my other one of the things I struggle with a little bit with chakras in as you say, most of where we come from this is as a healer. So it's been really common for me over all the years I've been working for as a healer. Every so often someone turns up and says, I had a clairvoyant reading, or I even went for a massage, or I had I don't know, some acupuncture or something, and the person told me my throat chakra is blocked, or
Right.
my base
Right.
chakra is blocked, or usually it's blocked. Sometimes it's, yeah, I think usually blocked is how it's described. And so I've come to see you because I don't know what to do about it. And apart from the fact that I always find it, it sort of feels like it leaves people with, okay, like I'm diagnosing something, but then I'm not really telling you what you might be able to do about it. Um, and and then I think we can get over focused on one chakra being blocked, and actually there's all sorts of other stuff going on that if you can help the person sort that out, there's a very good chance that the
Well, and
chakra will just correct itself.
yeah, and you said something really powerful that I think I didn't even, that when you said it, I went, of course, of course. I think we were talking at one of the aura episodes when you said, you made the point that it's not the chakra that's creating the problem, it's the problem that's creating the block in the chakra.
Yeah.
Right. And people often think that because they have a blocked throat, that's causing communication problems, but it's actually the communication problems that are causing the blocked throat. And so unclearing the chakra doesn't help much in the long term if you're not looking at what's causing the person's reluctance to communicate. I'm going to say it. Are you ready? Their truth. Dun, dun, dun.
That
Right.
reminds.
And I thought you said that and I thought, oh wow, like that's absolutely the case. And I think that's often the mistake that people make about chakras is they think if they work with the chakra, that
Yeah.
will solve the problem instead of realizing again the chakra is blocked because of something else, which is why I think for you and I it's a little anticlimactic because we're
Yeah.
solving the problems and oh look, the chakra's all happy now.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like we don't even really have to do anything with the chakra.
Right.
It's just, okay, why is is the energy here feeling kind of constricted or out of balance in some way? It reminds me of when I very first started working as a healer. One of my really early clients was this amazing guy who did lots of great things, but his it always felt like his kind of blind spot for himself was he had terrible trouble with his neck, and he'd spent
Mm.
probably thousands of pounds seeing chiropractors and massage people and all kinds of things. And I had a conversation with him one day. I mean, this wasn't why he'd come to see me, but had a conversation with him about his desk at work. And it turned out he was sitting with his, I forget the details, but like, his monitor was in one place, his keyboard was back in the days when these were all separate, and, it was all in different places. So he was basically constantly twisting his neck. And
Mm.
I said to him, could you maybe have one of those things that you like proper document up on, so you could just have it in front of you so you could try and arrange things so that your neck is in a neutral position? And he said, oh no, the secretaries have those. I can't have one of those on my desk. And it was kind of like, okay, but you're literally causing yourself a pain in the neck by sitting in this, and we all have stuff like that we do that we know is not, ideal for us. But again, it was like there was all these people were working to try and adjust his neck, but of course it
Right.
wasn't
See,
really
there's
going to
a
work
problem.
because
Yeah.
the way he was
Yeah.
sitting. And I think chakras are kind of, again, are like that.
Hmm.
We can make people's chakras look all shiny and nicely smoothly rotating in balance and clean and clear, but if the underlying problem isn't addressed and worked with, then they're just going to do the same thing in 5 minutes or 2 hours or a couple of days or a week or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. And none of that is helpful if you're not trying to be a healer.
No.
If
No.
you're
So
somebody who's
let's
just
come back to
right, if you're just trying to show up to this podcast, you're just like, I just want to be able to feel my chakras. I just want to understand how my energy anatomy works. I just want to feel things in my body that I know are there, but are harder to access. None of that information is helpful.
So now we've justified why it's taken us so long to do this episode. Let's do something useful and talk about But maybe do you want to work through them in order, or do you think the throat chakra might be a good place to start, given you mentioned that?
Yes. Well, but before we do that, I want to finish my thought about where I went. So there's all these frequencies, right? And these frequencies of being associated with certain things. And I think we can all agree that frequencies cause and effect, because if they didn't, we'd be out of jobs. And I started to look into where that came from, and I was actually kind of disappointed. It turns out that whole mathematical system isn't ancient. It comes from the 1950s. I can't remember the name, but some bright, smart person put some mathematical things together, and it was based on real math, but it's kind of like a self-referential system. It's like, these are the frequencies for these things because this is the math, but this is math because these are the things, kind of stuff. So I had to sit with that for a moment. I was like, like sit in my disappointment. But then I found that there's a much, much older, there's a reason why that person did that, why he started searching for it, because there's like a 3,000-year-old Sanskrit oriented system around the chakras having tones and symbols and things like that.
Yoga thing that I was talking about. Yeah.
So that's the original. And then I think somebody in the West, in what we think of as the West in the 1950s, sort of knew that was true, but instead of building upon that, they created a whole new different arithmetic for it. And here we are. And hopefully people who know a lot more about that will let us know about it. That would be fun. So with that in mind, so there's a tone, there's a symbol, and there's a name. And then there's a quality that goes with each chakra. And I do actually think it makes sense to start with the ground, because the name of the name of that bottom chakra that sits where we would be, that I think we all kind of know, that sits on the very bottom in our pelvic floor, is called the root chakra, but it's also the ground, and the ground is the description of it. The symbol of it is a square, and the tone for it is LAM, L-A-M. And what I thought was really interesting about that was when people were in that if you put all those things together, you have all the different ways that people learn.
Yeah. Really, yeah.
And the idea was that when you chant or when you tone the LAM sound, it's not so much that it represents the chakra as much as it makes the person become the chakra. It's much more esoteric than what we think of it. So it was never, I'm going to make this tone, I'm going to chant this sound, and that's going to clean my chakra. It's more that I'm going to chant this sound, and I'm going to become in that moment this vibration, this chakra, and we become the same thing.
Which I think that concept is quite hard for the Western mind to wrap its head around. Yeah.
Say more about that, Karen. How do you wrap your head around it?
Well, I think I was thinking about this the other day. Maybe this is a topic for another podcast. I was listening to something about how the mind, we often we talk about it, the mind, the body, and the energy system are different parts, and then the emotions are kind of in there overlapping, and that actually the mind, making this distinction between the mind and the body, isn't real, because we are our mind, we are our body, and a lot of the stuff we're learning about, the neuroscience and the, brain health, mental health is actually brain health. And it's like we want to kind of be able to break stuff up into separate parts, and then we can think about it. And And I think that's, I mean, that's very definitely the direction that certainly, I mean, I know this is true in the UK, but I think in America as well, the healthcare systems, it's like we have these different parts of our body that are all, you know, you go and see this doctor for that and this doctor for that, and nobody ever looks at the whole of you and how those things are all functioning together. So that idea that my chakra is kind of like I mean, we sometimes call it as healers an organ of the energy system, and that immediately starts making it a separate thing. So then the idea that we would chant a sound and become the chakra, and I mean, some of my understanding of that is that we're becoming the vibration that is the vibration of that chakra. So maybe that's a different way to say it, that it is, if you're struggling with the becoming your chakra, you know, and in that moment, because you obviously still have all your other chakras, it's not like you've just got that one and the others cease to exist. But it's like we're becoming the vibration by chanting that noise or focusing on that symbol.
Well, then if we look at the other things that we're saying about the root, which is the ground, which is the solidity, which is the foundation, which is is support and a static state, by chanting that sound, by focusing, because for some people that are visual, focusing on the square, which is the symbol of it, putting all those together and sort of creating that experience for ourselves, it becomes much more meaningful.
Yeah.
So in having put all this information, and then what I thought was really interesting, because I think learning all of these things becomes easier when you're making comparisons, especially when we're talking about things inside of ourselves, because we're fish in water, right? Like we're living with that all the time. And so in understanding how that chakra feels, how the root chakra feels, can often be easier when you're comparing it to the next one up, which would be the sacral, which is the sacral, which is a few inches below the belly button. But I want to remind people that the chakra is not on the surface of the skin. It's actually right in the center of you. So it's, you know, from the top of your head and it goes down through the spine. So the middle of the chakra is near the spine, and then it blossoms out in the front of the body and the back of the body.
I wonder if we should just pause there for a second, just almost like back up, because I can hear our producer Carol saying, but you haven't really explained what the thing is.
Yes.
So a chakra is essentially, in a very simple nutshell, an energy center. Some people call it a vortex, and I'm never quite sure if that exactly fits, but and it has a front and a back part. So if you were to look at a human from the side on, there's seven main chakras, which most people talk about, and then a few others. But essentially we have energy centers all over our bodies. It's just some are kind of more crucial. And so let's say we're talking about the seven main ones that are aligned between the crown of your head, and there's an energy line that runs straight through the center, the core of your body, and ends at your, as Tiffany said, at your pelvic floor. So the crown chakra is on the top of your head, and the grounding base root chakra is between your legs on your pelvic floor area. So, and then the other five are aligned along there. And if you were to look at a person side on, there's these two parts, they kind of, as Tiffany was saying, blossom out through the front of your body and the back, but the actual chakra itself is on that center line of the body.
Well done.
Thank you.
I think another great word for than vortex is intersection, because it's the place where many things come together, like the intersection of a motorway.
Yeah.
And in that way, I realized in the as above, so below paradigm, that what's in the physical body is mirrored in the energetic body, that they're kind of like joints. And I'm curious what you think about that, because I never said that out loud until this event. And I thought, oh, it kind of is like a joint. It's the place where there's a lot of mobility, a lot of movement. And, you know, in the way that a joint has a bone and a tendon and soft, all the soft tissue sort of comes together. And it's actually quite complicated. And what happens in that chakra, what happens in that joint can affect things quite far away. The chakra is like that too.
Yeah, I think that works. I also now feel I want to go and study physiology a bit more and see whether there's how else that fits. But anyway, we won't get inside that's definitely a whole other episode.
Yeah, that's definitely a whole other episode, and not one we should be at all trying to pretend we can do.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so moving up, right, into the sacrum, is the crescent moon is the symbol, which I thought was fascinating. The sound is vam, and it's water. Unlike the root, which is earth, this is water, and it's movement and adaptation. And I'm very curious if you have thoughts on how that turns into a crescent. Like square seems obvious to me. Crescent was interesting. Movement, except for the feminine principle, which is really watery and adaptive and movement and
Well, and the moon is very much ruled by the tides and that connection between the moon and water. I mean, I tend to think of that chakra as being kind of associated with some of our like oomph, our drive, our forward, well, not necessarily
motion.
forward in a linear sense, but a kind of a moving in your life. So that would absolutely fit.
Well, and I think that's what's interesting, because if we jump back into our healer heads, that chakra is all about, as you say, will. And I think that's where the movement, the adaptability and ability to change according to what's necessary so that you can keep going. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if I have an immediate answer for how that relates specifically to the crescent shape. Yeah.
I think you're right that it's moon, tides, femininity, water.
Yeah, I mean,
The other
tides
thing
are
to notice,
constantly in motion, aren't they?
yes,
And always
very much
like
so about
yeah, and they're heading in one direction and then they crest and go back in the other direction, and then they, so it's like a, yeah.
I think what you make me think of is, again, this idea that it's easier to learn something in contrast, how that's really so very, very different than the root, which is square and stable and static state and earthy.
Yeah.
And the other thing to notice is that we've gone from lam to vam, which is a slightly higher in the body, higher in the mouth, softer in the mouth.
It feels like it should be a higher pitch, doesn't it? If that's the right.
Well, I found this man on the internet who was chanting each of these tones, and what I really appreciated about what he was doing was that he wasn't changing the note. He was just changing the word. And so you could really feel the difference, because your expectation would be that you're now speaking or chanting higher. But what he did was he kept the note the same. So any changes that you felt were really very much about the notes of the word itself and the frequencies behind the word, not the frequencies in the note that he changed. And it was really interesting. So I would encourage, I can put a link to this person on our show notes. It was really interesting, but you'll find them everywhere. Yeah.
So tell us the next one.
So the next one is the spleen. And I think other people call it solar plexus. Have you heard that word for it?
Yeah,
you and I were taught spleen.
I don't know anybody other than us that calls it spleen.
I think you're right. Well, really, not even in England? I always assumed it was an English thing.
I've never heard anybody else, apart from people who did their training where we did our training. I've never heard anybody else call it anything, just the solar plexus. Yeah.
Solar plexus. Okay, so solar plexus it is, represented by an upside down triangle and by the word Ram, right? So we've gone from Lam to Vam to Ram, which again is higher up. and associated, and the element is fire and associated with vitality.
Hmm.
And I thought that was interesting because we think of you and I from a healing perspective, that's digestion.
Well, and in Ayurvedic medicine, they talk about digestive fire. You need the right balance of digestive fire to digest your food. But if you have too much, you start getting like reflux and yeah. I can't tell you how many meditations I used to do lead a lot of guided meditations, and I can't tell you how many I've done where I've made that one without thinking about it, like thinking about that being a kind of sun center that then radiates out through the body. Yeah. And I don't know how I started doing that, or whether it was because I specifically knew something or just intuitively that's where I went with it.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, right? It all really does come together. And I think even though I don't know that I can put words to the upside down triangle, again, I can just feel that it's right. It just feels right. Yeah. Are you ready for the next one?
Heart center.
Heart center. Air, the word yam with a Y, and it's openness and the ability to be open. And it's what I think of as the Star of David, but I don't know what the other words for it are. It's the two triangles that are on top of each other, one pointing up, one pointing down.
Is there?
Yeah. And again, I love this idea of going the yam, the element of air. Yeah, the element of air. Yeah.
And love, of course.
I don't know enough about that symbol outside of the Jewish tradition to understand why it would be openness. But what I do love about it is that it's a beautifully balanced symbol.
It's also the center of the 7 chakras. It's the middle one.
Interesting.
So you're kind of going up and
what do you
down.
think of when you think of that?
Well, I was thinking about the 2 triangles. One's pointing up and one's pointing down. And it's the, 7, if we've got, the middle chakra number 4. So it's in the middle of the 7.
Yeah.
So balance.
In my head, sorry, say that again?
Balance. It's like the
Balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if I think about what I think it's interesting is that when I looked into it, people use the word openness far more commonly than communication. And I think in the West, we often think throat communication. Again, are you speaking your truth? Are you saying what you need to say? But the more ancient way of looking at it is openness. And
hang on, have you shifted up to throat?
I'm sorry. I'm mixing up my throat and my heart. My apologies. No, we're in the heart, right?
Because heart, we often talk about are you open-hearted? Are you open to love and a relationship? Are you, Yeah.
But there's so many things to be open to, not just love and like the whole span of are you open to information? And I think that's where the balance is or I just off the top, just comes to me now, there's balance in the discernment of what we are open to and what we don't open to, and how do we manage that balance? Yeah. Okay, are you ready for the next one?
Yep, go for
it. So throat, expression, it's the circle, and the word is hum. Hum, yeah. So we've gone from lam to hum.
So lam was heart. No,
lam is the very bottom. Yeah, right, so it's lam, vam, ram, yam, and now we're in hum, which is so very throaty, isn't it? Hum. And again, it's a circle. And I love that it's a circle, because I just feel like a circle is just like a tunnel going out into the world. Like I love that image.
Yeah, and I would think of it as from a healing point of view, as very much to do with our expression and communication. And I think that one's really, really easy to see. What we were talking about at the beginning about a blocked chakra is a symptom, not a cause of something.
Yes.
So when we're and that expression lump in your throat, when you're trying not to cry, you're like literally swallowing down your emotion, and it feels like you've blocked that circle. And you're if you can allow yourself to feel, express, communicate that feeling in whatever way you need to, the chakra will very quickly become unblocked or less blocked.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so here's where it gets kind of interesting as well. If you go back thousands of years, this is where they stopped. They
Really?
didn't,
Wow.
yeah, they didn't. I mean, they were aware of the third eye and the crown, but they were considered kind of almost different, a different category. So they didn't have a symbol, they didn't have a tone. They just had a belief that the third eye is awareness and the crown is consciousness. But they were considered completely different structures, completely different experiences than the first five that were
Wow.
grouped together. And if I had to put words to it, I would say that the first five is a very human experience, and the next two are really much more ethereal and getting us into a different realm of consciousness and awareness.
Yes, that's a better explanation than what jumped into my head.
What jumped into your head?
Well, I was thinking about, I mean, again, going back to what I was saying about this almost like false kind of idea of our body and our mind being two completely separate things. But actually, I think in some ways they are, because of the way we've messed ourselves up. And the crown chakra and the third eye chakra, which is between, more or less between your eyebrows, are in the head, which is where we tend to think of our mind as being, even though our mind doesn't exactly have a physical location. Certainly our brain's in our head, and whether there was something about that, but I couldn't quite get to what. So actually I think your explanation works.
It's interesting. So when I say, so people have added tones and symbols to them more recently, but please keep in mind that I'm talking about the difference between 1,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago. So not at all modern times, but not the original conception of it.
Right.
And the third eye, this may surprise you, but the sound is kasham, with a K in the front, and the symbolism is an oval on its side.
Okay.
An oval on its side. Yeah. I guess you could argue an oval on its side is a vague shape of the eye, human eye.
Of an eye, yeah. No, I was just going to say that this one we call it the third eye, so it is very much associated with. It's used for people who are practicing something like clairvoyance. They're often associated with well, interestingly, the second sight they call it, or the sixth sense, or that we can use it to in some way see or at least perceive energy, beings, some kind of spiritual something. Different cultures would say, or different traditions would say different things, but that it is a kind of more seeing organ, if you like.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. And do you have thoughts on because we've gone from Lam, Vam, Ram, Yam, Ham to Kasham. And to me, that seems like an odd turn. Like we turned a corner here somewhere, and I don't know how we ended up here. Do you have thoughts about that?
No, why have we got two syllables?
And such a hard one. Like, we've gotten to Ham, which is this very soft throat. And I actually said that out loud at the event. I said, like, I don't understand it. And one of the people there said that when she focuses on her third eye, it feels quite sharp to her and quite specific. And she thinks that's what the K is bringing into it. And I thought that was an interesting perspective.
What about protection? In relation to the third eye, I might have a conversation with somebody about not wanting to walk around with their third eye kind of gaping open. because you don't want to be receiving too many weird energy stuff. Like you need to function in the physical world. So it's
Okay.
something that's good to like gain. Like if you're learning to be a medium or a clairvoyant, one of the things you need to learn is how do you open your third eye and close it again. And
Yes.
so whether the two part parts of that word, I don't know. I'm completely, it's the first time I've heard it, so I'm completely talking off the top of my head. But whether there's some kind of protective, because I wouldn't think about needing to protect the lower chakras.
Mm,
But if we are moving more into
true.
the two more esoteric, more other realm, spiritual world, the others are more in the body, and
Yeah,
more in
very
that
much so. Yeah.
sense, sort of more physical and associated with very physical organs, and um, that somehow we're moving. If we're almost then using the two higher chakras to connect outside of ourselves, do we need some kind of uh, greater filter or protection or something with that?
Hmm.
But now I want to know what the
Greater
word is
care.
for the crown, to know if that also has two.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I mean, there is something to be said for these two being different than the other five.
Mm.
Yeah. So, okay, so the last one is the crown. And again, as I said before, it's consciousness. And this tone probably won't surprise you. It's Om.
Right.
It's Om. Om
Mm.
being, I think, regarded as the ultimate expression of consciousness and universal connecting consciousness.
Yeah, and it's often I've heard it talked about in terms of like a God energy, whatever God means to
Hmm.
you, gods, like
Right.
it's again kind of universal, but whether that's nature or
Hmm.
a more religious kind of figure or spiritual thing, but yeah, that it's an ancient word for God, almost before
Right.
all
And this,
the human invented religions were. And by that I don't
right.
mean that that all the structures we put around the practices we
Hmm.
put around religions.
The infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the symbol that goes with that is the thousand-eyed lotus. So,
Right.
the thousand-petaled lotus
Hmm.
that I think most people are familiar with. And if you're not, will be super easy to find on the internet.
Although you
Yeah.
you misspoke and said eye, but I'm pretty sure I've also seen images of like many eyes around the crown of the head.
Yeah.
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 I think that's true. Yeah. And that's it. And something that we did that was actually really powerful is we listened to this more expert singer uh, chant each of these as a group and went through each of them to feel them. And I would encourage people to do that at home to or focus on the symbols that go along with each one, because that's how you can present in yourself
Hmm.
what each chakra is. And through that awareness, you with practice, you'll also be able to see that what we mean when we say from a healing point of view, that it's a vortex, that it's a junction, it's the center of many things coming together.
Yeah, and I guess perhaps the other bit to add to that is to just really keep in mind that um, imbalances in your chakras or blockedness in your chakras is very likely to be a symptom of something rather than a problem in
Mm-hmm.
itself. So that practice you described, Tiffany, sounds really lovely. And I think on my website I may even have a meditation that's a kind of a visualization moving up through the chakras. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and those things can be really lovely to help you connect into your body more. But and I suppose they can also help us to just think, okay, is there something, if you think about each of those ways that Tiffany has described, am I struggling with something that kind of fits with that? Like, do I feel really in my head and not very grounded? So that might be showing up in my grounding chakra. Am I having trouble speaking my truth and expressing my emotions? That might explain why something feels a bit off in my
Mm-hmm.
throat area.
Mm-hmm.
Am I trying to develop myself a bit more spiritually? Maybe I'm trying a bit too hard, or maybe I'm kind of ignoring it when really that would be a good thing for me to do, and that might be causing some kind of imbalance in one of the two higher chakras. Have I been really hurt in relationships, and my heart chakra is
Yes.
really kind of like
Make it harder to be
overprotected.
open. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Am I feeling a bit directionless, and that's why my uh sacral chakra is feeling a bit like I'm not really listening to myself and my so I think rather than saying it's I need to do lots of work on my chakra, just try to think about, okay, well, what might this relate to that's going on in my life that, if I'm really honest with myself, is a bit out of balance, that might then be impacting the health, my chakra's ability to be in good balance.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great way of looking at it. Well, hopefully, everybody, this has given you some ideas. Please send us your questions. Thank you to everybody who's supporting us on Patreon. You are
Yeah,
deeply
thank you.
appreciated. Thank you to everybody who's sending in questions and comments. You are all deeply appreciated. And hopefully, we'll see you next time.
Thanks very much for joining us. See you next time.